Adding fluoride to drinking water has been a common but controversial practice for a long time. The Public Health Agency of Canada says fluoridation is associated with about a 25% reduction in tooth decay. In Saskatchewan, 40.4% of the population actually already has access to fluoridated water. And some of those communities include Saskatoon, Estevan, Weyburn, Assiniboia, Swift Current, Kindersley, Humboldt, PA, and La Ronge. Missing from that, Regina and Moose Jaw. They were supposed to get fluoride in their drinking water following upgrades to the Buffalo Pound treatment plant. But that plan is being questioned by some newly elected Regina City councillors.
You don't see protests about fluoride in toothpaste. It's always community water fluoridation. So there's that aspect to it, and it's very polarizing.
Today on Blue Sky, we're digging into the debate. We'll hear about the concerns of a Regina City councillor. We'll also look at the latest science around fluoridation. The anti-fluoride movement has gained steam since the appointment of RFK Jr. as the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. And in our second half of the show, we'll look at the influence his views are having on health attitudes, even here in Canada. If you have thoughts, you can always join the conversation. Call 1-800-716-2221 or send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. Okay, so this is actually an issue that we've been talking about for years in the city of Regina. Alexander Kwan, our resident council reporter, unintentional fluoridation expert, joins us now to give us some background. Hi, Alexander.
Hi, Sam.
Get us up to speed. What is the history here in Regina when it comes to fluoride in water?
So this has been a contentious issue here in the city. 4 separate times it has been put to a public referendum, and 4 times it was voted down. But it is a topic that at least I thought was settled. See, back in 2021, City Council voted 10-1 to include fluoride in the city's drinking water. Now, fluoridation is not happening yet, despite that vote. Council agreed to wait for the fluoridation to begin until upgrades were completed on the Buffalo Pound water treatment plant. Those upgrades are slated to be completed by the end of this year, with the fluoride upgrade set to be installed in January 2026. But a newly elected councillor wants to stop that from happening at all. Ward 10 councillor Clark Bezo has introduced a notice of motion that he wants to reconsider the 2021 decision made by that city council. You'll remember that the municipal election saw 9 of the 11 seats go to brand new councillors. Here's Clark Bezo explaining why he wants to revisit that topic.
I put the motion forward to stop this program. Right now, we don't have fluoride in our water, and we really have to ask ourselves, is this really for the best interest of the entire community? This is a topic that the new council should look at. There is 9 new faces around that table, and there is a strong opposition to the last council and some of their motions that they put forward, and this was one that I heard on the doorsteps. I would like to see a good open debate with the proper people involved, and the proper people being, the science, the technology involved, and all the aspects around the fluoride. I would also like to see this motion stop so we actually don't add fluoride to our water.
Now, I should note that the 2021 debate at council was very, very, very long. I was there. It also had multiple experts from the oral health and dental fields advocate for adding fluoride. And this does not appear to be just a one councillor push for change. Bezo said he'd spoken with other councillors about this topic and that there is an appetite for change. Mm-hmm. Regina's new mayor said he's not opposed to revisiting the topic, but Chad Bashinsky also stressed he will defer to experts.
If he believes there's new information to be considered, we'll consider it. That's what we're here for. 2021, that's when the decision was made. If between then and now he's, confident that there's something new to look at, then we'll definitely listen to the experts today and see if their opinion has changed since the last time we talked about it.
Now, Bezo's motion will not be discussed until after the city budget, which is scheduled for next week. It's not clear. I guess actually we did find out this morning that it will be scheduled for a special council meeting set for May 2nd. So it's a little while off, but it's coming up.
Are you hearing? I mean, you have sat in many city council meetings, including the ones on this. Is there an appetite from the public for this debate to come back again?
I think so. It was an all day long debate around this topic last time. Like I mentioned, there were experts from the dental field, from the oral health field. There were also people who came out from the city, just regular residents, advocating for and against. There was definitely people who felt like they didn't get the result they wanted last time in 2021, so I wouldn't be surprised if they come out again, especially planning a special city council meeting. It's an indication that city administration knows this will get a lot of attention, this will get a lot of people out. My suspicion would be this will be the only topic on that agenda because it's going to be a full day-long debate on this once again.
Will this derail what the previous council has decided? Like, will they have a special meeting just to talk about it and that'll be the end of it? Or will there be some kind of does this just derail all the work that's already been done?
I think it has the opportunity to do that. The notice of motion, essentially, it'll be to revisit the vote that the previous council had in 2021. So essentially, this would be a ripping up that entire decision. So implementing fluoride in the city's drinking water. So it definitely has the chance of just kind of reversing everything that was decided in 2021.
Okay. And that special meeting, Friday, May 2nd, 9 a.m., there is a whole meeting agenda planned. People can speak at these meetings. And I mean, you encourage people to speak at these meetings. This is where you have your say. Anything you want to add to the conversation for people who might be wondering how to do that?
You have to go online to the city's website to register to speak. Delegations are always encouraged, but make sure to sign up early. You do have a lot of notice now with this kind of meeting off in the future, so make sure you get registered early, and I am expecting a lot of people to want to talk about this.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Alexander Kwan, a reporter here at CBC covering municipal and provincial politics. So let's talk about the studies and the science, shall we? Here in Canada, the Canadian Dental Association says adding fluoride to the public water system in order to prevent tooth decay is, quote, safe, effective, and economical. In Calgary, fluoride is on its way back. Officials there took it out of the water supply in 2011. Now, the city says it will be back in the water by the end of this month. Lindsay McLaren studied what happened to dental health in the years without fluoride. She is a professor of community health sciences at the University of Calgary, and she joins us now. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you were listening. You've heard how this Regina City Councillor wants to reopen the debate, how he has essentially reopened the debate about fluoride in drinking water. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was struck by how similar the storyline was to what I've seen here in Calgary. It's very, very similar. And in fact, there are a lot of similarities over the entire history of fluoridation going back to the 1950s. So this issue ebbs and flows. It's inherently political. Things can shift with a turnover at City Council, and it kind of is what it is.
So why is Calgary putting fluoride back into their water?
Yes, so one of my PhD students is studying that time frame and that decision making process. Her name's Katrina Funditis, and it seems to be kind of a combination of factors. So on the one hand, there was some research that my team led, which built a study around the 2011 decision to stop fluoridation in Calgary to evaluate the implications of that decision for children's dental health. And we did show that dental cavities have gotten worse in Calgary compared to in our comparison city of Edmonton, where fluoridation remains in place. So I can talk more about that research if you like, but in combination to that research, there was some well-organized advocacy efforts to help people to understand the research on fluoridation and its benefits for dental health. And there were also some efforts within City Council by members who felt strongly about the public health measure. And so all of that combined, and probably some other factors as well, led to a decision by City Council to revisit the issue of having stopped the practice. It was put to a plebiscite or a public vote in conjunction with our 2021 municipal election. So it sounds like same time frame as you. And about 62% of voters were supportive of reintroducing fluoridation in Calgary, and this was the largest majority by a long shot. So we've had 6 or 7 plebiscites over our history in Calgary. Many of them did not pass or did not secure 50%. So this was a strong majority in support.
So before we go into more of the research and everything else, what is fluoride and what does it do for people who hear this conversation all the time? They might know their dentist paints it on their teeth or they sit with the trays in their mouth, but what does fluoride do?
So fluoride is a compound that is added to water, or it can be delivered via other means. And mechanistically, it helps teeth in 3 different ways. Now, let's see if I can get this right. So it inhibits the demineralization of the enamel. It promotes the remineralization of the enamel. So it strengthens the enamel, which makes teeth more resistant against decay. And it neutralizes bacteria circulating in the mouth, which is caries causing. So there's 3 mechanisms through which it prevents cavities.
How did you find yourself passionate about fluoride?
It was as much a surprise to me as anyone. I am not a dental person at all. I actually am not sure I knew how many teeth we had until about 2011. But I am a public health person, and I care deeply about the public's health and the measures that we take to provide the conditions for everyone to be well. And so from that perspective, in 2011, when there started to be rumblings that City Council in Calgary were thinking about stopping this practice, I found it quite fascinating, and I started to follow it with quite a bit of interest. It provided an opportunity. I'm an academic researcher, and it provided an opportunity to study the decision. So we built, myself and a team of researchers and dental professionals built a study around the decision. And I like to just point out that this is what research looks like in public health. So often when people hear research, they think of the lab or the clinic, but public health is about people's real lives and populations living in real time. And so we built a study around the decision. Briefly, it involved collecting data from population-based samples of grade 2 children in both Calgary and in Edmonton. Again, Edmonton still has fluoridation in place. And so we did assessments of their teeth, the health of their teeth, and we gathered quite a bit of other data on things like their residential history, whether they usually drink tap water, dietary factors like sugary drink consumption, access to dental care, other sources of fluoride, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we actually did 2 waves of this study. So one was about 2.5 years after fluoridation had stopped, and then the other was a longer term evaluation about 7.5 years after fluoride was stopped. And briefly, at the longer term evaluation, we found that whereas in Edmonton, 55% of kids had dental cavities. So that's with fluoridation in place, and that's still pretty high. But in Calgary, it was 65% of kids had cavities. So this difference is statistically significant, so it's not likely to be due to chance, but it's also large. And closer to fluoridation being ceased, the kids in the two cities were much more similar, and in fact, Calgary was actually a bit better. So through our analysis, we concluded that it seems quite likely that fluoridation is a key reason for these differences in the kids' dental health.
How can you be sure? I mean, that's the question of the skeptics, right? Is how can you be sure that it was fluoride that was responsible for the better oral health?
Right. So that's a really important question. And going back to my comment earlier about how this is what public health research looks like. So it's not the type of thing where you have, an intervention, a treatment that you as the researcher can control every aspect of it. That's not how it is at all. This is just something that happens, and you have to study it as best you can. So this is called observational research, and it involves just thinking carefully through the other factors that might be playing a role and taking these things into account. So I mentioned earlier that we had a questionnaire that the kids' parents completed, which gathered information on any number of things, on all sorts of different things. And so, for example, what we can do with that information is assess whether kids in Calgary versus kids in Edmonton differ on those other factors. And if so, we can statistically take that into account. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's one step. Another example is, so if we see a difference in cavities between Calgary and Edmonton for our entire sample, that's one thing. But if we then look at the subset of kids who, based on the questionnaire, have lived in the city for their whole life, and they say that they usually drink tap water, the association must still be present in that subgroup, right, in that subpopulation. And if it's not, then that signals possibly a flaw in our reasoning. The second thing I'll just mention is that for a small subsample of kids in each city, we took fingernail clippings, which serve as a biomarker of recent fluoride intake. And
really?
So that with, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So this allows us to confirm that kids in Calgary indeed had lower fluoride intake than kids in Edmonton. And this is important because, one could imagine hypothetically that knowing about fluoride's absence in the water, some families might try to offset that by getting fluoride from other sources. Or maybe dental professionals might make small adjustments within their scope of practice. Mm-hmm. And so our results show that was not happening, which is an important part of strengthening the attribution of effects to fluoridation.
Lindsay, can a person have too much fluoride? Is that something that can have any kind of effect on them?
So yes, certainly. And we know this from parts of the world where so fluoride naturally occurs in our environments. It's in water, it's in soil, etc. And so fluoridation is the adjustment of those naturally occurring levels to a level that is optimal for preventing tooth decay. And there is a very carefully constructed optimal level that is high enough to have the benefits for preventing tooth decay, but low enough so that it does not cause harms. And
what would be a harm?
I just want to highlight that this
curious,
is a really...
What would be a harm that would be caused by too much fluoride?
Yes. So the one that is well established is called dental fluorosis, and it's a modeling of the teeth. So it can range from kind of whitish flecks all the way up to staining and pitting of the teeth. And so again, this is seen at high levels of fluoride. It does not occur, especially the severe forms. It does not occur at the recommended optimal levels that we use for drinking water.
So it doesn't affect brain function, IQ, any of those things. It just affects your oral health.
So dental fluorosis, it's primarily an aesthetic consequence, although that is debated. I am aware of research on other kind of safety issues or asserted harms of fluoridation. And I think the key to keep in mind in interpreting that work is that it focuses on levels of fluoride in water that are far higher than the recommended optimal level. And that's key, because there's all sorts of things that are very bad for us at high levels, but at lower levels they're innocuous or beneficial.
Our conversation today is about fluoridation of water as it's come up in Regina. A decision that had been made may change now with the advent of a new city council and a councillor that is concerned about it. We're talking with Lindsay McLaren. She's a professor of community health sciences at the University of Calgary. Lindsay, before I let you go, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the conversations around public health right now, because there are a lot of conversations around decisions made about public health. I'm wondering what advice you can offer to our listeners around supporting science and where they can find the best answers and research for themselves.
Right. Well, yeah, it's rather heartbreaking to see what's happening to public health right now. Fluoridation is one example of the broader issue, which I think is the erosion of any kind of collective thinking about health, which is the crux of public health. And and I'm someone who takes the name of my field very seriously. So public health, right? It's about providing the conditions for everyone to be well, and it necessarily involves public policy such as fluoridation. And so often in these discussions, it may be explicit or it might be implicit, but it's almost made out to be as though we don't need any kind of public policy intervention to provide the conditions to be well. We can just place everything onto individuals. And there's kind of a narrative or a rhetoric of being able to make free choice and individual choice. But that is, I can't emphasize enough how misleading a narrative that is, because people's ability to make choice is fundamentally shaped by the context in which they're in. And if we are not providing the conditions for people to be well, then individual level interventions like encouraging people to eat better or to brush their teeth more are doomed to fail.
Lindsay, thanks so much for your research and for your insight today. I appreciate it very much. Good luck with your continued research.
Thanks for having me.
Lindsay McLaren is a professor of community health science at the University of Calgary. I want to take this conversation from Calgary up to northern Saskatchewan to La Ronge. Conversations there are currently happening about how to get more fluoride in the water in northern Saskatchewan communities to help offset the high levels of tooth decay. Patricia Skalicki is a dental health educator in northern Saskatchewan. Hi, Patricia. Welcome to Blue Sky.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Talk to me about fluoride in the water in northern Saskatchewan. How common is it?
So it's not very common at all across the whole far north. So that would, include communities like La Ronge, Pinehouse, Sandy Bay, La Loche, Bowell, Buffalo Narrows, Stony Rapids. The only communities that currently have community water fluoridation is the tri-community area around La Ronge. So that includes La Ronge, Air Ronge, and then the Lac La Ronge Indian Band. We have a shared water system.
So what differences in tooth decay do you notice from the communities that have fluoridation to the communities that don't?
So we do some data collection, and we do sort of study that year to year. And just to sort of give you a little bit of an example, not to say that, these numbers are going to wow you as far as having great oral health. We also look at grade, I know Lindsay had said they did grade 2 students. We do grade 1 and 7 students. And so in the community of L'Orange itself, when you look at the grade 1s, so they've probably got 20, let's say they've got 20 baby teeth and then let's say 4 adult teeth. The number of teeth affected out of all 24 is hovering around 6. So 6 teeth have been affected by cavities. When you look at other communities that are across the north, that number can go right up to 12, 13. So potentially 12 teeth that, are affected by tooth decay. So that is, that's alarming. And that is, there are definitely other factors, as Lindsay had mentioned, that can go into that, like, food insecurity, access to care, things like that. But it definitely is alarming. And to think that, even reducing that number of 12 down by 25%, that's huge, especially in communities that don't necessarily have that access to care.
I think it's known that there are issues to access in northern Saskatchewan, but can you give me some examples of where there are gaps when it comes to dental and tooth care?
Yeah, so there are gaps, I will say, across the north. There aren't a lot of, let's say, dentists that come north to a lot of these rural, remote communities. It's sort of, if there is, it sort of tends to be like a contract sort of thing where it's in and out. We have been lucky in the north to have retained some children's dental programs, and some of those are provincially funded, some of those are federally funded, and usually the oral health professional in those clinics are dental therapists. We unfortunately lost our training school in 2011. And so from 2011 until just recently, we have not had a lot of dental therapists to pull from to put into those communities. So we're very, very excited that the University of Saskatchewan has now reopened the dental therapy school. And so we're hoping that, those graduates infiltrate into the north so that we can provide a lot more of those services. So, some of our programs have had to change our thinking a little bit as far as providing those treatment programs, with fillings and extractions and those sorts of things, to more of that prevention. And, again, when we're sort of swimming upstream to try and keep our head above water as far as, food security and all of that, it is a very difficult thing. So if we did have the opportunity to, at least at a population level, decrease that decay by 25%, that is huge for families in the north.
I mean, if you don't have access to a grocery store to buy a toothbrush and toothpaste, that's a really big problem when it comes to taking care of your oral health. But fluoride in water requires you to have access to good drinking water. Is that successful across the north? Is that an option across the north in many cases?
So, there are definitely some communities across the north that have, continuous boil water advisories. So I work on the provincial side of things, where our communities, for the most part, are good. You can drink the water in most of our communities. I won't say that there aren't, times where, that there isn't the ability to drink the water. For instance, if the power goes out for, I think it's longer than a couple hours, you have to boil your water. If you don't have continuous, pumping at those pump stations. But it really hasn't been a huge issue in the communities that, that we have dealt with. And if it does, like I said, it's not a long-standing. I know there's communities in Canada that have gone years and years without potable drinking water, but we don't seem to have that.
Patricia, Tim has sent us an email, and I don't know that you are a 100% fluoride expert, but I know you know a lot about fluoride. He would like to know, does fluoride have additional health benefits apart from teeth, like bones, other things, or is it strictly oral health?
To my knowledge, it's mostly oral health, although I have heard of, people taking fluoride for, if they have, let's say inner ear issues with the bones in their ears. I do know that they have been prescribed fluoride to sort of help
Off-label use, if you will.
strengthen those. Sure. Yes. Yes. And fluoride also, actually the fluoride varnish that we use was kind of introduced as a desensitizer. So when you go to your dental office and you've got sensitive teeth, fluoride has always, the higher levels of fluoride have always been used for that desensitizer. And then, they initially it was sort of an off-label use as cavity prevention, but, we do know that that's working given our data. Yeah.
What can you say about getting people to buy in? I mean, there is, in a lot of cases, particularly in rural and remote areas, and particularly in the north, a mistrust of the medical system, or they don't believe that it can help them because we have a very big province with a lot of area to cover and a lot of people who have medical and dental needs. Do you find in the north that there is a struggle to get people to buy into oral health care?
Yeah, I think in the north, just healthcare as a whole, there has been a lot of trauma, in the north associated with healthcare. And so that is an ongoing problem, not just with oral health. I do find that in our communities, it's building, relationships and building that trust with them, and just providing some of that education on what what can we do? What are some little things that we can do to improve, oral health in our families, which does obviously include, the fluoride toothpaste. It does include, reducing the frequency of sugar. It does include drinking water, making water the drink of choice.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, Patricia, thanks so much for giving us a little spotlight on what's going on in northern Saskatchewan. Appreciate your experience and the work that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Patricia Skalicki is a dental health educator with the Saskatchewan Health Authority in northern Saskatchewan. We talked to her in Larange. Now, earlier when we were talking to Laura, we talked a little bit about public health and finding information and basing things in science. Donald Trump, we know, has appointed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead his Department of Health and Human Sciences. He has the Make America Healthy Again campaign, and it's gained a lot of support from people who want action on chronic disease. But his appointment has also alarmed many health officials. To talk about how his appointment could affect us north of the border, we are joined by Rewat Deonandan. Did I get it? Deonandan? Say it for me.
Deonandan.
Okay. As someone whose last name is always pronounced wrong, I apologize. He is an associate professor and epidemiologist at the University of Ottawa. Thanks for being here, Rewat.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to the show. I read your op-ed in the Ottawa Citizen about RFK Jr. What stands out to you about this conversation about fluoridation so far?
What stands out is the extent to which the RFK narrative, by which I mean the quasi-science narrative that he champions, has percolated through the USA and over the border into Canada. So this way of thinking and talking is not relegated to the MAGA Maha crowd. It's very much something that is throughout the Anglosphere at the moment, driven by these charismatic figures like RFK.
So what exactly is the Department of Health and Human Science? How is it different from our Ministry of Health, for example?
It's much bigger. It's the budget is like over $1 trillion, I think, is substantial. And it includes things like the CDC. And they manage everything from regulating which drugs are licensed, to deciding which vaccines are going to be licensed, to advising people on what's healthy and what isn't. They dictate the funding to the tune of billions of dollars in primary medical research. They run the very important PubMed database of published medical literature that so many scientists around the world depend on. And they're leaders in things like vaccine policy that many countries, including Canada, look for leadership that probably we shouldn't anymore. So they are an extremely important group in the medical frontier.
So how much control does this give Robert or RFK Jr., we'll call him for short for time purposes. How much power does that give him over the United States and the conversations around public health?
Gives him a lot of power. Now, his power is going to be limited by the people under him, the ones who manage the independent agencies that HHS oversees, like CDC. But the appointments there are people who are like-minded to him, people like Jay Bhattacharya, who are also a bit fringy science-wise, in my opinion. So what really limits the RFK influence is the public pushback. We're seeing it now a little bit in the measles outbreak in Texas, where for a while he was saying, and he's still saying some ridiculous things around measles, but at least now he's saying, well, people should consider vaccination now if they think it's the right thing to do. Whereas weeks ago, he would have said, no, vaccines are dangerous, don't bother. So there is some evolution on that front, due, I think, in part to public outcry.
I was going to say, why do you think he changed his tune? Because he has famously spoken out against vaccine, against fluoride in drinking water, and he's made many other controversial statements as well. So is he that easily influenced by public opinion?
His psychology is a mystery to me. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but he's a politician in his heart, and so he is going to be motivated by the opinions of his constituency to a large extent. Also, he's one of those people, I think, whose mind is swayed by the most recent data presented to him, even if it's not the best data. As an example, I give you, he's of the opinion that he doesn't get flu vaccines because the flu shot compromises your ability to fight off other infections. Now, he gets that from one or two fringe papers that suggest that finding, but in the ocean of evidence, that's not compelling. So he is cherry picking some papers that stand out to him, and so his thinking can be swayed by interesting elements in the data that pop out that don't necessarily reflect the fullness of wisdom and knowledge, and that's what I see happening here. So all it takes is someone to shout loudly enough and authoritatively enough, with the backing of enough people shouting in the public to perhaps sway him. But I will add that he's not saying that people should run out and get vaccinated now. He's saying that that it's an option and parents can consider it.
I'm wondering, as you're talking about this and him being a politician and cherry picking things, is this the danger of having people with no medical background running medical systems?
100%. Now, that's not to say that you absolutely need medical doctors to run medical institutions. Hospitals aren't necessarily run by medical doctors, but they're run by people who know their limitations. If your job is bureaucracy, your job is administration, your job is leading and managing people, it's not assessing the quality of scientific evidence. The scientists do that, and they make the determination. And I think what we have here is expertise creep, not understanding the limits of your own expertise.
Expertise creep. I like that. You should trademark that. We have a really strong relationship, though, Canada and the U.S., when it comes to public health. How is what's happening with RFK trickling into Canada and Canada's decision makers?
Well, first of all, at a public front, a lot of Canadians get their public health guidance from the USA because they shout more loudly. Their media has greater penetration. They see RFK on the news more than they would see our public health officials on the news, for example, and he will say ridiculous things, and that drives thinking here. The way it affects decision makers here is a bit unclear because it's going to be ideologically filtered. So if you're automatically ideologically aligned with his way of thinking, you're probably going to take what he's saying to heart. I don't think that's the case for most Canadian public health officials, who for the most part are quite well-versed in science. The impact, though, is twofold. One is in driving culture, increasing the anti-vax mentality here, but also in denying us data. So the CDC is suffering incredible amounts of layoffs at the moment, and that's leading to all sorts of bad outcomes, things like decreased infectious disease surveillance, decreased focus on mental health, for example, not good guidance for people exposed to H5N1, and the Epidemic Intelligence Service, that's actually an organization they have, has been severely compromised. So we are not getting data from them that we have depended upon in the past to make decisions here. And we have to scramble either to fill those gaps with modeling and through wisdom or through other parts of the world. An example of this will be that they have canceled their flu committee meetings. Mm-hmm. These meetings are meant to decide upon the formulation of next season's flu vaccine. People don't know the flu changes every year. That's why we need a different flu vaccine every year. And we look at what's happening in the Southern Hemisphere to guide us in deciding what this year's flu shot will be made up of. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it not so right. So by doing away with these meetings, they've compromised the Americans' ability to develop a vaccine for this coming fall that'll be well attuned to the circulating strains. In Canada, we have relied a little bit upon what the Americans are doing to inform what we do. Now we can't do that. We're going to have to rely upon a lot of what the WHO does and layer on top of that our own expertise to make decisions locally. And I would argue that maybe that's a good thing for us. Maybe we need to be a bit more independent in this kind of decision making. And maybe it's an opportunity for us to be world vaccine policy leaders. Okay. And we definitely have the expertise for that.
Mm-hmm. Ray Watt, I'm going to get you to hang on a second. I'm going to go to the phones. We do want to hear thoughts from our listeners today. The number to call, 1-800-716-2221, or you can send us an email, bluesky@cbc.ca. Kathy in Regina is on the line. Kathy, you have concerns about environmental safety in general. Go ahead.
Well, it comes into wonderful irony here because I heard the conversation while I was at the Sask Polytechnic training dental care clinic in Regina here. And one of my people also getting treatment, she spoke very knowledgeably, and she was so concerned about damage happening to our natural environment. So I'm concerned about the conversation today, just talking about personal health. But what is the effect on terms of environmental health as well? And I'm hoping that your speakers could speak to that with knowledge.
Okay, Kathy. Thank you for the question. Ray Watt, do you have an answer for implications on fluoride in the environment?
Not directly. I will say that RFK isn't 100% evil. Like he has some positive qualities, including he's been a strong advocate for preserving the environment. And he's worked with friends of mine, actually, on that front. And he says some good things around personal health and responsibility, diminishing the role of big pharma, things like that. The problem is he will sandwich the lie in between truths. That's what makes it so seductive. But I don't have any insights beyond that about environmental health.
Okay, something we can definitely look into down the road for sure. Kathy, thank you for the question. Ray Watt, today is our 5-year anniversary of the first case of COVID in Saskatchewan. As an epidemiologist, I'm sure you, like the rest of us, refer to it as dark times. But I'm wondering, what you're seeing is some hangovers in the damage to trust when it comes to public health that have come out of those dark times.
Oh, 100%. We are much weaker now than we were in 2019 in responding to another pandemic or public health emergency, in large part because the people no longer trust the supposed elite. Who are the elite? I'm the elite. Public health officials, doctors, media, politicians are all the elite. And that's been driven in large part by funded intentional disinformation merchants wanting to create chaos in our society. And I don't know what the solution is, but we have this incredible amount of distrust that I'm concerned about H5N1, avian flu. If it does achieve pandemic status, how will we deploy the vaccine sufficiently with sufficient uptake to quell it in time when we don't have trust from the people that it will be a real thing? So we really are in a situation where different groups of individuals are defining reality differently. We haven't got a shared definition of facts. So this is quite worrying. And I think it is the issue, the crisis of our time, how to combat disinformation.
Ray, what are you focused on now? I know that there are so many different things going on in public health right now. What drives your focus these days?
In teaching the next generation of epidemiologists and health scientists how to communicate with the public and with policymakers.
That's great.
Yeah, it has to be done, right? We can't back away from it anymore. It can't be the domain of a rarefied group of scientists. Everybody has to be able to do this and be willing to do it. It's part of the responsibility. And
are they receptive to it?
To a large part, yeah. But the fear is there. I mean, I've been treated quite poorly in many facets online because if you're an anti-vaxxer or someone who doesn't think COVID is real, you're going to attack the face you see on TV. And so what we have to teach the next generation is philosophy, how to be resilient against this kind of hatred when you know you're doing the right thing for your society.
In a world where we are inundated with the U.S. politics. We're almost hearing more about it than Canadian politics right now. Where's your silver lining? Where's the positive impact?
You see most of the bad things shouted loudly. There are a lot of quiet people out there who are quite rational, who are just looking for, to pay their bills and go to their jobs and rely upon the government and the scientists to do their work. That's still the majority. Mm-hmm. So we have to stop focusing on the loudest voices shouting and focus more on what the quiet plurality are saying.
Okay. Well, Ray Watt, thank you so much for this. Before I let you go, Lindsay McLaren is still with us and raised her hand while you were speaking. So I would like to go back to Lindsay to see what she has to say. Lindsay, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, this most recent topic is super interesting as well, and I'd love to talk about that. But if I could just slip in on the caller's question about
the environment. Yes, please.
Because I did look a little bit into that a few years ago. It was a student project where we had the same question: does it have implications for environmental harms? And I'm so glad you raised that question. This is something that deeply concerns me as well. Like my soul is just feeling crushed by the magnitude of the climate crisis that we're in, and that is such an incredibly important topic. What we found was basically no indication that fluoride in water has any consequences for the environment. But the thing we need to remember, and this connects with Ray Watt's great comments around teaching and teaching critical thinking. The focus on questions like that serves to distract from the bigger causes of the climate crisis that we're in right now. So it amplifies very, very tiny risks in a way that really bears no resemblance to the reality of the situation. So I guess combining the two topics, we need a new generation of critical thinkers who can kind of sift through this in a thoughtful way and keep our eye on the big factors that are shaping our well-being, like the erosion of our democracy.
Oh, that was so great. Thank you for answering that question and bringing that back full circle, and a great way to end the show. Lindsay, Ray Watt, Patricia, thank you so much for joining in on this today. This is obviously not the end of the conversation about fluoride in water in Regina, but you've certainly given us all something to consider. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.